Good afternoon. A pleasure to have you here. My name is Martin Frick with the World Food Programme, and you might be wondering about this title, Restoring Land, Restoring Lives. But we were thinking deeply about how to frame this afternoon's discussion. And if you look at the world's dry land, you will see an overlap of misery, extremism, land degradation, water scarcity. This leads to conflict all too often. And what unites us here on the panel is basically that we all believe there's a better way than conflict, and the key to it is the land. So if we are restoring land, we are indeed restoring lives as well. I would like to introduce my panel very briefly, but I would like to ask the panelists to say a bit more about themselves and also maybe a sentence or two what's your angle is on restoring land and restoring lives. I have next to me Afshan Khan, UN Assistant Secretary General for the Sun Movement. Sun has not a cult, it's the Scaling Up Nutrition Network, which is something I'm personally passionate about. Afshan will tell you more about that. Then next to her is Cyrus Copeland, the Executive Director of, now listen carefully, Treedom for Palestine. Not freedom, but Treedom for Palestine. Cyrus will tell us more about that. I have Elke Siehl, Director General of the Sectoral Department of the GIZ, German Corporation. And last not least, there is Andrea Meza. She is the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNCCD, that's the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the only UN convention that has an activity in it, and that tells you something. But without much ado, maybe Andrea, I start with you right away because you lead it, the convention that is actually there to restore land. How is there an angle between the lives and the land?
Thank you, Martin. And it's great to see that we're addressing this issue of land. And as you mentioned, I'm the deputy at UNCCD. UNCCD is one of the 3 Rio conventions. We have climate, biodiversity, and this one that deals with land and drought resilience. And it's clear for us that investing in land, it's really a way of investing in a stability, investing in food security, investing in water security. And it is about understanding this connection between healthy land, healthy soils, and the way to guarantee that we can have nutritious food, because it's really a direct link of having nutritious food. And when we have healthy land and healthy soils, we also need to note that we're talking about the biggest water reservoir. So there are different interlinkages that we have. And I just want to take the opportunity to say that recently we had our COP in Riyadh, and it was COP16. And we had the adoption of a critical COP decision on restoring productive lands. And this is, it was a very interesting and comprehensive COP decision with a good level of ambition, because it talked about all these interlinkages, the importance of investing in sustainable land management to have healthy lands and healthy soils, to guarantee water management, but also to talk about nutritious food and diversifying crops. So there we have a global already agreed COP decision to start working at the national level. And this is where all the other stakeholders, the different agencies can play a role. We are at the multilateral level. We have a common understanding and a common framework. Now it's time to move and translate this into action. But we have agreed this, and as well, under the presidency of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they have committed $12 billion to support the agenda of drought resilience, but also of achieving healthy land and healthy soil. So we have a tremendous opportunity to start collaborating, unlocking the engagement of the non-state actors. And for the first time in our process, we had a Riyadh Action Agenda, the engagement of these non-state actors. And this is why, as well, there were other important COPs decisions, the establishment of a caucus for indigenous and local communities, and this was as well tremendous achievements. So just to say, we see that the parties are saying we want to work in this agenda. I think it's one of these convergence areas. We can bring the non-state actors, civil society, the private sector, academia. Now it's time to really do good projects and work on the ground.
Thank you very much. And part of the action agenda is, of course, the young people. And you see the two young gentlemen in the front row. And just a little spoiler, you will hear from them a little later. But there was a magic word in what you said, many magic words, but one was nutrition. So nutrition, as I said, is something I feel personally very strongly about. Afshan, what's the perspective between changing land, changing lives, and what has that to do with nutrition, please?
So I think we really see the nexus between nutrition, climate, and peace as a lived reality for many. The 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis showed that 37.7 million children aged 6 to 59 months across 26 crisis-affected countries are suffering from acute malnutrition. So even when food is available and land may be there, it's often not nutritious. So this disconnect leaves millions of children not just hungry today, but deprived of the opportunity for a healthy, peaceful, and productive future. So I'm really glad we're having two youth at the center of the room here, because also we see part of the solutions as being future-proofing the future for children. And that means stronger investment in nutrition and nutritious foods. Secondly, I think a stronger voice for young people, producers of nutritious, healthy, quality food, smallholder farmers, and private sector engagers who distribute food. So that distribution of food is clearly important as well. And we see this platform of a coalition between UN agencies like WFP and UNICEF, who often work in many fragile contexts, linked with civil society and local civil society organizations and youth groups, small and medium enterprises, and the national governments themselves as important stakeholders to act in unison together to address some of these challenges. So to just give some practical examples, if I may, in Democratic Republic of Congo, SUN has partnered with academia and local businesses to support the production of complementary foods made from locally sourced products. In Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan, we partnered with WFP to help operationalize national food systems pathways, aligning both humanitarian assistance and long-term development priorities. And in South Sudan, we've worked again alongside government, private sector initiatives to bolster value chains in fragile food systems with a homegrown school meal program and agricultural production that focuses on providing dietary diversity, because we really feel that building amongst young people the right healthy choices in schools will influence behavior patterns and food production later on. So the land, climate, peace nexus for us is critical, including when we look at displacement and forced displacement of populations, whether it's due to climate or whether it's due to conflict. So I think the opportunities are many, but the need to bring multi-stakeholder actors together on a clear agenda for action to implement programs that are sustainable in the long term is where we want to go as a partnership.
Thank you very much. Bringing it on the ground, Cyrus. So many bad news from Palestine. I mean, so many heartbreaking news. We heard it this morning in the opening address. But here's a message of hope from the West Bank. And so please.
Not just hope, Martin, but actually success in the middle of what's a very fragile environment and very difficult conditions. What we do, just so you all know, I run an organization called Treedom for Palestine. We plant sustainable olive tree farms for vulnerable Palestinian farmers. These olive tree farms are protected by fencing around them to protect the farmers and the trees from settlers. And also they're irrigated for issues of sustainability. And it turns out that the act of planting in what is perceived as an inhospitable region is actually very rejuvenative. And by restoring the land, you do many things, and those things kind of happen in succession. At the local level, if you plant a freedom farm, that's what we call them freedom farms. If you plant a freedom farm of 250 olive trees, a mature freedom farm yields $35,000 in income for the farmer from those 250 trees. That income lasts for the duration of the lifetime of the tree. And it might surprise you to know this, but olive trees live for 500 years. So that one planting, which by the way costs a very affordable $9,000, will over the lifetime of the farm yield $21 million of olive oil for 15 successive generations. That's at the very local level, and that's a lifeline, obviously, for Palestinians right now. At a regional level, planting also has a very beneficial effect in terms of our work with gender equality. So half of the farms that we plant are for women, and because women can now be economically self-sufficient, they determine how the money that they earn is spent. And this bolsters their role not only in their families, but in communities. Building out on that, on a regional level, if you plant land in Palestine, that land is protected. So you might not know this, but unfarmed land is liable to be taken over. There's like an old Ottoman law that says if your land is unfarmed for more than 3 years, the occupation can take your land and use it for settlements. So by planting the land, we ensure that planted land stays in Palestinian hands. Expanding that outwards a little bit more, we're also doing the work of addressing the refugee crisis. Because if you give people a reason to stay, a dignified reason to stay on their land, they will. So that this solves one of the major issues that we are, as a world, facing. And the other major issue that we're facing is also solved, in part, by planting, which is climate action. It turns out that the olive tree does a really good job of sequestering carbon. And so over the lifetime of 500 years, every single farm that we plant will sequester 6 million tons of carbon. That's like several thousand transatlantic flights, all neutralized by olives. So by restoring land on a local level, it's all kind of like throwing a stone in a pond. The ripples of that expand outward into a very global way. And this is why the act of planting, in this case a tree, is actually a very quietly revolutionary thing that we can do in an otherwise fragile context.
Thank you. It's indeed the ecosystem is the complex system that can help our human complex systems if we get this right. Few people know that the World Food Programme is not only a humanitarian agency delivering food parcels, but it also works on the basic conditions on food security. And in that function, there is a program we are running with the Ministry of Economic Cooperation called the Sahel Resilience Initiative. Now, UNICEF is a partner in that initiative, and so is German GIZ, Technical Cooperation. And so I want to go to you as the next speaker and say, so where does GIZ, as Germany's flagship technical cooperation organization, sit in this restoring land, restoring lives narrative?
Yeah, I think I can also underline from our side how important it is, and land restoration is fundamental for sustainable food security. So this is something what we experience as well on the ground. Restoring degraded land contributes to creating more productive and resilient agriculture and food systems by addressing the root causes of food insecurity. And without land restoration, broader systemic or structural change, this is our experience, it is impossible to build true resilience among the affected population. Communities will remain vulnerable to future shocks and continue depend on humanitarian assistance rather than moving toward their self-reliance and long-term development if land restoration is not tackled. So therefore, we are working always on the two levels, also on the level of soil and also on the level of farmers. We are supporting in ecological farming and how to protect their soil and how to avoid soil erosion. And on the other hand, and this is, I think, typical for GIZ, we also always address the systematic and systemic approach, so that we support the change also from the societal level. This is one point we would like to stress. The other one is, of course, and this also is nothing new and has been stressed here as well, that investing in long-term food security is not only a development goal, but is a key driver for peace and stability. And it's on the one hand, degraded landscapes often fuel competition over scarce resources and thereby intensifying conflict. So by restoring land and securing livelihoods, communities become also more resilient. Their risks are reduced of conflict and supporting the foundation of lasting peace. On the other hand, we see all the multiple crises around the world, that this is exactly favoring again, also working against the agricultural and food security in the countries. So therefore, we have to we have to tackle food security by investing in agriculture and by supporting nutrition in the communities on the ground. And so an example we have seen 2 years ago when we have been on a site visit also to Niger together with the World Food Programme and UNICEF. I think we have seen a lot really good programs who did this integrated approach. On the one hand, supported the communities to build their own livelihood, to further agriculture, but also to support the change in the communities and in the restoration of the land. So therefore, I think the last point I would like to make is that we very much are favoring that we have to work in cooperation and in multi-stakeholder cooperation. And I think this is a good example in the Sahel region, what you mentioned, where we, together with UNICEF and WFP, put our strengths together. So from working on the ground, supporting the direct need, but also supporting systematic and societal change. And to putting all our efforts together, I think we use our money in the best and more effective way.
Thank you very much. And I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Eliane Ubalijoro, who I just recognized in the audience. She is the boss of CIFOR-ICRAF, which is the World Agroforestry Institute. And we are just organizing a roaming microphone for you to speak to us. You're free to come here, and I'm happy to yield this little pedestal here, and I can roam around because we really want to hear on the scientific side from you. So maybe you want to come on stage. We are getting a microphone to you at the earliest. I see the team is already working on this. And we would also then need a microphone for the two young people sitting in the front row. But please join us, and here's your microphone. Wonderful. And so maybe I can get you to a cold start after a warm welcome to talk to us. It's very good to have you. About your perspective. You were listening to our conversation about restoring land, restoring lives. How is that working with agroforestry? And I think Cyrus already alluded to the magic of olive trees. Please.
Yes, I just want to say how thankful I am that this session was organized and to have heard all of the contributors so far. So at CIFOR-ICRAF, our work really cultivates 70 years of information science within our headquarters in Nairobi and in Jakarta. So we work all over the world. We have 9 offices in Asia, 14 in Africa, and we also work in Brazil and Peru. And so what we really see as, restoration is climate action, and it's also peace building. We really see restoration, land restoration, helping to mitigate the effects of a warming planet and to make communities more resilient to the many threats that come with it. For me in particular, I was born in Rwanda and became a refugee in Canada when I was in my studies. And now I have the opportunity to be back on the continent in Africa, leading an organization of 800 people working in restoration. And the work we do is really around restoration around the world. We also work with UNHCR, working with displaced populations. And so what's really important is really this idea that healthy land allows people to thrive where they are. And we also work along the Great Green Wall, which is this audacious 100 million hectare program that is looking at restoring land in 11 countries across the dry lands of the Sahel, where WFP is also working. And so what's really exciting about if we're able to achieve this is really about creating 10 million jobs in rural areas to sequester 250 million tons of carbon. And what's exciting about this is I was in an earlier session around what can Germany's role be in this changing donor development era. And so this convening itself is critical because we need not only to do great work on the ground, but we also need the populations where the funding is coming from to understand why this is important. It's important to have people thrive where they are, because when people thrive where they are, you have peace locally. And when you have that, there's less pressure on other countries to be contributing. And so the also really critical information to understand is that many of the populations that are suffering from climate change aren't the ones that are behind the greenhouse gas emissions that have accelerated this work. So as global citizens, it's how do we balance that responsibility of local and global action all together? And it's really important that the work we do is about building that capacity locally. And so if I think of the work we're doing along the Great Green Wall, is really knowledge for the Great Green Wall. And so this funding from the European Union we are working on with FAO helps really empower local stakeholders along the Great Green Wall to enhance their knowledge management and sharing mechanisms to develop learning and state-of-the-art platforms to connect satellite data, citizen data, AI. And I think with all of the examples we've heard so far, it's really about how do we empower local populations? How do we allow them to thrive where they are? I love this idea around land. Planting trees is critical to have them take ownership. So I flew in from Jakarta. I've been in Indonesia for the last 2 weeks. And part of the way people over time have marked their territory is planting fruit trees around their properties. And so as we share more knowledge around this idea of claiming land, and healing people, we collectively work towards the restoration of the 2 billion hectares of degraded land around the world.
Fantastic. I steal your microphone, but I give it back. It's for a good purpose, because I want to hear from the young people. You have heard about the multi-stakeholder partnerships. Many are looking at the youth. What's your comment? What have you heard and what's missing? Please, and first I give you, John Keane, the floor, and then it goes to Ahmed.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm John Kino Chieng from Kenya, a youth advocate with disability championing for the climate action. I'm very happy with our panelists, what they're discussing. And just go straight away, I'm the founder of Wheels for Trees. Wheels for Trees basically focusing on climate change and disability, like how we can bring personability on board in terms of inclusive, because we are the most vulnerable being affected with climate change. So maybe I have 2 questions. Number 1 question, because I'm talking about the inclusivity for personability in relating with what you are discussing here about the food and others. But I'm passionate about doing the food program, because one of the main challenges that affecting us personability is about the food insecurity. So in my place where I'm coming from, I come from urban area, and you understand the population. And so I do advocate like how we can come up with a smart agriculture. I have my own doing a smart agriculture with my own initiative. So my question is, number one, how are people with disabilities considered or included in your intervention strategies, particularly in conflict or climate affected areas? That's a general question to all of you. Yeah, because now we are discussing all this and we need also to include stability. Then the last question about the innovation and scalability focus. Can you share any scalable solution that have successfully included personal stability in agriculture or in food security efforts? Thank you.
Thank you. And we
Thank you.
just continue with Ahmed, please.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. And congratulations for all the good work you are doing for the community. I am Ahmed Ag Mohamed, community leader and member of Young Voice of Sahel. I come from Timbuktu, the north of Mali, where we are facing of a lot of challenges like insecurity. Even this morning there is terrorist attack in Timbuktu, and also the food insecurity, and then the resilience. So on this side, the young generation are the first victim, and we are also the first online to take engagement to be resilient and to fight these challenges. And then I think it's the time also to recall that the good initiation that GZ and the World Food Program and UNICEF are doing to help in resilience in this community, which as even me I beneficiate. So the question is, what are you can doing to include more society for keeping the young on the center of the project of resilience? Thank you so much.
Great questions. Thank you. And I'm looking around. We were speaking about inclusion, particularly on disability, on innovations that are worth scaling up, and how do we get more young people engaged? I'm looking at you. You want to start, Elia?
Yes. So the first question. So coming from Rwanda, one of the things that was difficult, but the reality is after the genocide against the Tutsi, it was really important to include everyone in bringing the country forward. So Handicap International was present in Rwanda. Now they're called Humanity and Inclusion. And so one of the things that's really critical is this idea of including everyone and leaving nobody behind is really important. And I think one of the things that is key around youth engagement is also, how do we bring technology? How do we create opportunities for everybody? So for example, we work around trees. So for example, how do you make access to high quality trees available to everybody, whether you have a physical disability, whether you're young or older? We know that a lot of farmers, that are growing older in age. So how do you create that sense of community that create access and benefits for all? Because we all have accessibility requirements that require collective enabling. And so that's really important. And it's really important that we engage locally with populations and we empower everybody to be working collectively in this work. And so that's also where digitalization can be really supportive around access to knowledge and data, and to ensure that the information flow reaches young people so that they can be engaged, ideally that they can have access to finance and be empowered to be at the center of this work. And so the more we can do to allow enabling of inclusion of everyone is really key to the work we do everywhere. And that's why for us, working with UNHCR is really critical, because displaced populations often have a lot of challenges, but that doesn't mean that we should exclude them. It's really about how do we ensure they have access. I thought it was amazing this morning that in the opening, we had a German minister who was a refugee. And so again, we have to remember that all lives contribute, matter, and should be recognized. And so the more The restoration work is about restoring our collective connection. And so the more we work at healing the earth, the more we work at healing our interactions collectively as humanity.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, in a time where we have more wars than at any given moment since the Second World War, that war is producing not only death, but disability at scale. So this is a very pressing question. I have Cyrus, I have Afshan, and then Andrea. Cyrus.
I love your question, both of your questions. And I'll say two things. First of all, actually, one of the benefits of working with a local trusted partner on the ground is that we get to decide together what kind of, who should benefit from the plantings of our trees, whether they are cancer victims or widows or young mothers, or in the case of two farmers that we planted for in the past couple of months, one of the farmers had a disability, one of the farmers had a son who had a disability, and they needed a source of sustainable income in order to kind of like make their already hard lives a little bit easier. I want to tell you a story about the particular power of planting when it comes for vulnerable children. Several months ago, there was a Palestinian farmer. His name was Bilal Saleh. He was known as the thyme seller, but he sold thyme and he sold the olives that he had from his farm at the local market. In the process of harvesting his olive trees last year, he was murdered by a settler and shot down actually while he was harvesting. The settler was released the very next day, but Bilal's family not only struck down by grief, but also their farm had been taken over by the settler so that they could no longer even have a sustainable income from them. We went in and established a new Treedom farm for them in a safer area, and as I said, we protected that farm by surrounding it with steel fencing. On the first day that we showed up to do the planting, you can imagine that this was a very heavy day. Your dad or your husband has just been murdered, and you've watched the settler who killed your husband go free. The mother wore a mask, and it was just like she carried her grief on her face. There was nothing joyful. She was consumed by grief. It was the same way with her children. But something happened in the middle of planting about as the morning shifted into the afternoon, which is you started to see the children get involved in what it meant to plant, to do what their father had done, and to restart that on their own terms in a safer environment. The little girl, I think her name was Layla, carried around a keychain of her dad in which she had a picture of him. And she showed it around very proudly to everybody who was there helping. And at one point, she set down the keychain and she started to plant a tree by herself. And you could see that she was also in some way setting down the baggage of grief that her very young 9-year-old self was unequipped to handle, and engage in the process of cultivating new life. Now, these are kids that, if you imagine your father is killed, these are kids that could easily have grown up angered by that situation, embittered, maybe even turned to the logic of vengeance. It's logical. But somehow, by planting instead of fighting, I saw what it meant for them to turn away from their grief towards the much more constructive act of doing what their father had done for all of his life, but in a new way. So yes, the answer is we are very much given to the welfare of children. In Palestine, as you can imagine right now, there are thousands of mothers, families, and children who are facing the same kind of disillusionment and situation. And by planting instead of fighting for change, we're actually giving them a new lease.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing the story. Afshan, you wanted to come in, and then I want to give the floor to Andrea. And despite the fact that this thing that says it's only 4 minutes, if you have a question, raise your hand. We will squeeze time. We will tell this clock to go slower to make time. Afshan, please.
Thank you. I'll be brief, but I do want to answer the question directly. I think one, first of all, it's extremely important to have youth voices, not just within the audience, but on the stage. SUN, as a movement, has more than 3,000 civil society organizations that are part of that movement. Almost half of those have youth members or youth representatives. And when we surveyed them earlier this year ahead of the Nutrition for Growth Summit, they came up with 4 key asks. First, to be able to have their voice heard at conferences like this on the stage. Secondly, to be able to have systems at the country level that allowed inclusion. Thirdly, jobs, skills, and opportunities to be able to take your planting example, help grow the economy and their communities, but with adequate training and support for livelihoods and engagement. And fourth, to come back to your question, inclusion, making sure that there was sufficient inclusion for young people with different skills, with different abilities. So really an opportunity to broaden engagement in the scope of discussion going forward.
Thanks very much. We are already being warned. Andrea, please, and then I have also Elke.
And thank you so much as well for the question, and I'll be super brief on this one. It's about having your voice in the COPs, in the multilateral processes, in the negotiations. It's about having you as part of the delegations. It's about having you as part of the projects that are happening on the ground. So we are as well very thrilled. There is a youth caucus, as you know. There was this youth program, the Academy to Negotiators. You are part of it, and it's about developing these skills, this training to really have your voices so we can do this more inclusivity part as well of the solutions of the COPs decisions that we will be having. So it's also an invitation to continue in that pathway. And I really like, just to close this, because I think it was so inspiring, some of the messages that we were hearing. I think that at the end, this vision that restoring land, it's about healing our communities, healing our relationships with the land, healing our dynamics. And I think that I was just writing here, right, that we can recreate. I know that the world seems horrible sometimes, but we believe in multilateralism. We believe that another world is possible. We are seeing some good examples, and we need to continue working towards that direction by restoring, regenerate, heal, and yes, believing that it is possible.
Thank you, Andrea. The screen just changed. I believed in a miracle that we have 5 minutes extra. I think we have. I'm just arm twisting here, and I give the floor to you for your closing remarks.
Yeah, but also only just some few words to add. So we, of course, always work also in inclusive approaches. And to integrate youth into our program work is so important because they are often the drivers of change. And especially, I know also talking to farmers on site, especially the youth told us, so we want a change, otherwise we will leave. And so it's so important also to have new technologies on the ground, to use digitalization. These are all these new modes the youth is asking for. And it's important to all, in addition to what you've just mentioned, really to have them as a key driver of change in the programs. And thus to be able really to stay in the field of land what they own, and not to leave for the cities.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Seems to me we don't have the time, do we? Okay, so then there's one question from the young lady on the first row. Thank you very much to the organizers that we can take extra time. And maybe in the meantime, there's the gentleman here in the back in front of the camera who also wants to ask a question. Go rapid, and we answer as fast as we can.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's not a question. I just want to share an initiative who directly contribute to land restoration. So my name is Hawa Diallo. I'm from Guinea. I'm a UNICEF youth advocate for climate issues in Guinea, and I'm also a co-founder of an NGO, ACOREC, Act Against Global Warming. And we initiated a challenges called One Birthday, One Tree. These challenges contribute directly to land restoration. We invited every person who celebrates his birthday to plant at least one tree. So the challenge directly contribute to land restoration through several concrete actions. When we have the community-led reforestation, each participant plants a tree on their birthday, encouraging civic engagement in ecosystem restoration efforts. And we have rehabilitation of degraded areas because the trees are planted in zones affected by erosion, deforestation, or irregular urban expansion. So
Thank
helping.
you. I think you already get yourself an after-session conversation with at least 3 panelists. Fantastic idea. One birthday, one tree. We will take that home. And I want to give the gentleman in the back the opportunity to ask in our bonus 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Bernd Berger. I'm associated with CAPRO in Bonn, a think tank. My question concerns conflict sensitivity. And the reason is that land is very crucial, is key to many conflicts, be it that there's a center-periphery conflict about how to extract resources, where the revenues go, but it can also be very local. In Myanmar, we had an example where the farmers didn't want to allow demining because they wanted to prevent land grabbing. So there's a lot of hindrances because the conflicts might reignite, especially when land is restored. So how do you handle this issue? Thanks.
Thank you. That sounds like one for Cyrus, and then we really need to close.
Yeah, it really, in the West Bank, it really is a fight over land. There's a reason that the occupation has made farming very difficult for Palestinians and erected many, many barriers to food security and sustainability. And that's because, I think it's no secret, they have their eye on the West Bank. We've seen over the past couple of years since the war began, not only settler violence, but the percentage of real estate that settlers occupied in the West Bank before the war began was 5%. That number is now up to 20%. And I'm now talking not just about settlers, but also illegal pastoral settlers as well. So the work that we're doing, yet again, is not only about keeping Palestinian land in Palestinian hands, but something much less defensive than that, because a lot of people talk about this issue in particular as a form of resistance. But when you resist something, you keep yourself in relationship to it. And we envision something a lot longer reaching, because one day this war will be over, and the trees that we planted will still be there, and the farmers who tended those trees will be proud and prosperous and free.
Oh, thank you very much. We made it within 5 minutes over time, but one thing is certain, this is just the beginning of a conversation. There is so much to be said about the connection of people with the planet, about the restoration, also in terms of the trauma suffered in war. There is so much in perspective when it comes to climate. There are so many perspectives to it that you can only ask why it's not happening much, much more. And I think that's going to be the topic of our next panel. And please join me in thanking my wonderful panelists and the youth delegates and everyone who participated in that session. Thank you.